Fresh I come from Sandgate Street. Dolly, Dolly, my best friend there to meet. Dolly, Dolly, the Dillen Doll. Dolly, 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 the Dillen Doll. Dolly, The Dillen Doll. Chapter 1. As I came through Sandgate. 1,000 noises swam through the darkness. Any single one of them could have woken her. She lay still and sipped at each one, shuffling them, maybe hoping that sleep would soothe them into silence once again. A deep bell rang somewhere down by the quayside. A scuffle of something close, too near to the bed, a door closing angrily, twice. A strange scrape of iron on cobble street, the sickening hockle and spit of a man outside the broken glass of the window, from where a high moan of a breeze now arose, followed by the flap of a ragged curtain and another tiny rasp of movement in the corner of this room. Then the scrape of cartwheels, for that's what it was, got nearer and louder, and a chorus of dogs barked their collective anger, like a lighting of noisy beacons up and down the street. First one, then another close by, two more, all distinctive, a gruff rasp, a yap, and now a howl cut off by a yelp, as an angry master kicked out in sleepy indignation. The yelp silenced the hollowing of the other hounds into a tumble of nervous growls and grunts, and on into silence. But now the crunch and grind of cartwheels was upon her, and the eerie glow of a swinging lantern swayed across the room, stretching shadows in the corner, then back and forth across the stained ceiling. "Bastard, I'll scout you, you shite, I'll bloody bray you." That's what had woken her, Bessie Lavender welcoming in the Sabbath with her weekly scolding of her poor husband, Barty, the tallest man on the quayside, but no match for the toothless, wide-eyed eye of little Bessie after a Saturday night in the Flying Horse with his fellow misfits. "Go back to your mother, you little shit flea, you're a bloody waster." "Me mother's deed, Bessie, though I love me mother. What a canny woman. And I love thee and all, Bessie." She could picture the stooping, cowering figure of Barty in the middle of the street, tearful from the sob in his deep, gentle voice. "Bugger off," snarled Bessie, and the door creaked to a slam and a rattle of a bolt. "Oh, Bessie," Barty moaned weakly, and she heard the scuff of his boots as he walked slowly down Palliser's chair and off towards the river, where he'd considered drowning himself yet again before falling asleep among the discarded jute bags at the end of Broad Garth. These were the voices of the quay, but not her voice. Her words were rounder, lighter. These had not always been her streets. She was awake now in the pit-black room. Her long brown hair, knotted by last night's passion, lay in an uncomfortable clump between her head and the coarse pillow. Her bare legs were suddenly cold, and her feet fumbled for a corner of rough blanket, but had hardly stretched across the broad form of the man sleeping beside her. She'd rather not unsettle him by rummaging for what little warmth her threadbare covering had to spare. The night before, she'd had fine sport with Moss. He'd come in from the Black Boy with the dregs of some brown gin in a broken bottle, and made straight for her, almost smothering her in damp gabardine and the smell of tar and tobacco. She'd feigned a coy struggle, but in truth relished his strong hands and wet mouth devouring her limp, pale skin, her slight, skinny frame folded like a rag toy in his clutching. "You nowt for looking at, Dolly," he said in his squinted style of speaking, "but you got ample charms and you can sing like a bird, and you please a man, you surely do." And please him she had, lost in his long and scarred limbs and whiskered cheeks. He'd pulled off his eye patch as they fell together on the bed, and she'd tried to stop herself from looking into the ragged ditch where another blue eye had once glinted in the foreign sun. But she always looked, and it always caused her to force away a shudder. Once he'd asked her why she had never inquired about the loss of the eye, but she'd answered that the remaining one was so beautiful she never missed its mark. He'd laughed and rolled back his head, and so didn't see the flash of horror on her face as she steeled herself against the imagined brutality that had snuffed out half of his light into darkness. Only a tiny spelk of this man's life was known to her, and exactly what had brought a brown-faced seaman from the sun-drenched colours of Genoa to the drizzly grey banks of the Tyne, and all that had occurred before and after, remained a fearful mystery to her. He'd first spoken to her on a Thursday night at the end of last year's summer, in the rowdy snug of the Flying Horse, where she was fitfully employed dipping pots and trimming lamps. She'd seen him once or twice in the weeks before, usually towering over a quartet of loaders at the Sandgate side of the quay, as she'd made her way from this very room above the vinegar store towards the big market to start her daily work. The patch, of course, while not unique among the scavengers and haulers in this end of the city, had singled him out when coupled with the thick black hair and darkened features, not to mention a laugh that had shown more teeth than she'd seen on any man's mouth that she could remember. Had that attracted her, repelled her, or just puzzled her? She couldn't remember. Then she heard him talking in the snug as it emptied out one night of a dog fight he'd witnessed in Montrose. His words were long, snapped, sometimes song-like, other times sharp and broken, a raw mixture of old Tyneside, Yiddish like Ezra the Lender, and Turkish like the shoe market vendors in the summer. He was French, she was told by a woman at the washer. A spy from the colonies, according to the muck-picker in Pudding Chair. It had been Harrison Marley, her own employer, whom she had heard refer to him as Marasso, that Roman pirate, that night as she'd stoked the fading ashes of the year's first hearth, as the motley clientele indulged in their rowdiness around her. "Sing up, Dolly," someone had called from the far end of the bar. "Don't turn round, mind," Auntie Proud had sneered from the corner table. "We don't want to look on you." There'd been a few cackles and laughs, as there had been since that first night months before, when the board arch of the fireplace had first echoed with her carefree lilting, skipping barefoot around the chorus of "My Bonny Lad." It was a song she'd remembered from her sister Bertha, lulling her to sleep when they'd shared a cramped old cot so many years before. That night, the gentle certainty of Dolly singing had somehow filled that room by way of the resonance of the stone hearth, until one by one the old keelers and layabouts and drunkards and dockers had ceased their prattle and racket, stared into their mugs, and swooned off into the dreamy melancholy of the young girl's lament. As she'd suddenly sensed the massive silence behind her, Dolly had swung round, her face red, her eyes wide, fearful, embarrassed. "Don't stop now, lass," someone had hollered across the trestles to a muttering of fond protests all round. "Do you know Bobby Shafto, or the skipper in the mist?" She'd ended up singing for an hour, startling even herself as to how many songs she knew, all from listening to her sisters at night when struggling together for warmth and sleep in the dingy attic of a long-lost childhood.